into a smaller form. All right, so let me share on the screen the long mantra version for Goddess Matangi. It's very nice. All right, so I'm going to sing it first through because this may be unfamiliar to you, some of the translation, and then we'll do a song in response. All right? So this is the long version to Matangi. Remember, the Goddess Matangi is actual speech and word. So it sounds like this. Om Hrim Aim Shrim Namo Bhagavati Uchistan Chandali Shri Matangashvari Savajanavasham Kari Swaha. All right, so you can repeat after me. Om Hrim
Aim Shrim Namo Bhagavati Ulka.
Wait. We'll just do a few words at a time, okay? Om Hrim Aim Shrim.
Om Hrim Aim Shrim
Namo Bhagavati.
Namo Bhagavati
Uchista Chandali.
Uchista Chandali
Shri Matangashvari.
Shri Matangashvari
Savajadavasamkari. Savajadavasamkari. Swaha.
Swaha.
Okay, let's do it all together. Take a breath in. Om
Shrim
Namo
Bhagavati Ukishta Khandari Shri Matangashvari Savajanava Samkari
Very good. It's hard without the back and forth on Zoom. It's a really pretty mantra.
Yeah.
And it means reverence to the adorable Matangi, the outcast and the residue, who gives control over all creatures. So this one, we just think of her as the goddess of the spoken word. We go, wait. Why is she the outcast? What do they mean by residue? What do they mean by control, right? So a lot of times when someone, especially, well, we see it in India a lot, when they're walking the spiritual path, they do not conform to any of the norms of society at all. They're, the half-naked sadhus walking around and chanting or dancing in divine bliss all the time. And if you read the autobiography of Sri M, which is very, very readable, and he is a modern day yoga practitioner, so interesting. He talks about different meetings of these humans who are really in the state of divine bliss all the time. And so that's what we mean by Matangi as a outcast and on the fringes of society. In terms of control over all creatures, here we're talking about not only audible speech, but remember the goddess Tara is the power behind that speech. So it's kind of the gross and the subtle and even the potential power of thought patterns. And what are thought patterns? They're nothing more than a vibration that gives some kind of information and receives information. So that's what they mean by control over all creatures. So let's go back to the question that that Natalie had, and you can see if you interpreted it differently.
Mm-hmm.
But in our speech with loved ones or other people in our life, what are the guiding principles that the goddess Tara and goddess Matangi can offer us that we can practice in our daily life? That was my interpretation of her question. I don't know if you guys had something else that we can add to that.
No, I think part of the question, she was looking for calmness to disassociate from anger. So
Okay. Okay. Yep, and I think we can bring that in to our conversation. So let's look again and reflect upon the goddess Tara Matangi. We know that Tara is the power of the spoken word. And the spoken word and the subtle word is really nothing but a reflection of our emotional patterns and our thought patterns. And this is a really nice 6-minute video of Sri M giving a talk that he gave this morning about what is the role that the emotions play as we live out our spiritual life. And I thought that's an important part in answering some of Natalie's question. Goddess Matangi, as I said, is also the actual spoken word and expression in art and music. So what's the practical wisdom that we can gain from her? Well, here I would refer back to the yamas and niyamas of the Sutras of Patanjali. It's in chapter 2, verse 35 through 44, which we're going to go into. I also always refer back to Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese, I think he died. Barbara told me, I think he died.
I think
But no,
that,
he hasn't died. He's leaving his body, but I don't think he's
yes.
actually gone yet.
Well,
okay.
I follow him daily. I think there's still breath in his body, but he's completely withdrawn. I think there's only one person that has contact with him. It's unusual because I love so much that is deeply thoughtful that he says and writes. But I get confused because you follow him and it jumps on, on the links that I follow him. Sometimes you just don't know where he is. But I think the main thing is he's just gone away. He's there, but he's not there.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. Well, I really like his writing on the 4 qualities of love. And I think if we look a little bit at what Sri M said in the sutras and Thich Nhat Hanh, we can begin to look at how to bring the wisdom of these 2 goddesses into our daily life. Goddess Tara, not to beat a dead horse, but we know that she is the nada or the nad. She's the divine vibration. She's the subtle sound, the potential of Om. Cindy Dale, who is a really, really interesting writer, and she writes a lot about subtle energy and energetics in the anatomy of the body. She defines sound as information that vibrates. And as, especially if you have more of a scientific background and you're thinking about fields, and you have fields of vibration, frequencies, and electromagnetic fields, that's how she speaks about sound. So Tara is knowledge as she uses the words, our thought patterns, and our emotional patterns, the mind and the intellect, remember that's the manas, to experience the world all around us. So Tantra really says, use this world as your sort of living experience and living experiment for all your spiritual efforts. And everything that we do, when you bring it down to really looking at its most subtle core, it is a sound vibration. Everything comes down to that. Sri M, in that little 6-minute video that I gave you, he talks about our emotions because he was asked a question, goes, should we ignore our emotions, or what role do emotions play on the spiritual path? And he's a yoga practitioner and a Vedic scholar. So he says, as in Tantra, that we use all our senses of cognition, of action in our mind to help identify, become aware, and refine our perceptions of the self, of who we are. So emotions are key. They play a really important role to our experience of our life here. And something that we've spoken about, and Annette has also mentioned, and also Barbara, that emotions are great. They're great learning tools. Sometimes we lose our way on the spiritual path when we have attachment to those emotions. Goddess Matanga, as the spoken word, dance, music, poetry, what can be the parameters? What can guide us in our expression? Well, we can look at the yamas and the niyamas. Yamas and niyamas are the first two limbs of Ashtanga Yoga, which is explained in the Sutras of Patanjali. In the olden days, thousands of years, hundreds of years ago, when a yoga student first came to his guru, he was not even allowed to practice asanas or pranayama or the preparation exercises for meditation until he had mastered the yamas and the niyamas. And these are really codes of behavior for you as an individual, in society, in your family, in a group, and also just within yourself. So these, you've heard of them, ahimsa, nonviolence, and you can expand that definition to words, to deeds, to what you eat, to what you speak. Satya is truthfulness. Ashdeya, to not steal. Brahmacharya, and this one is really interesting. Usually they just very tritely say, oh, it's just celibacy. But I do like this definition here where it's the right use of energy. Mm-hmm. But also, when Barbara and I were in Rishikesh, Ganesan, he said it was to emulate Brahman or the supreme consciousness. That's what Brahmacharya is. And so that, again, that's to walk the path of self-awareness to the best of our capacity. Aparigraha is to not be greedy. So these first five, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are the yamas, and that's how we can interact within society. Now, how do we interact with our own selves? Well, saucha is cleanliness. Mm-hmm. Santosh is to be content, or just to be in this moment, that eternal present moment. Tapas are discipline, austerity. So this you can look into daily life and say, I get up at 4:30 every morning and go running, or every day at 6 a.m. I sit down for meditation, or whatever it is. That is tapas. That is observing tapas. Svadhyaya is exactly what we're doing right now, to study text, to talk to other people who have been down that path. Self-study, whether it's self-study in contemplation or in dialogue or through reading, or now in the modern day, it's through Googling things. Mm-hmm. Ishvara Pranidhana is surrender to a higher being. Sometimes they say surrender to God, but not everyone has the same definition of what God means, and that also can trigger different responses that get in the way of understanding what it is. I like to think of Ishvara Pranidhana as to be humble, to be grateful, and to have an open heart so that you can learn more and be receptive to what comes your way. And so Goddess Matangi, in my interpretation, this is how I look at the spoken word and how we can use these as guides, the yamas and the niyamas as guides to how we speak. Now, when we look at Thich Nhat Hanh, you guys may be familiar with it, the 4 qualities of love. I just love that little article that he gives us. He tells us that the 4 qualities of love are actual, true love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So when he speaks about true love, he says in order to observe and experience true love, we have to really listen and observe the other person. So let's just look at this from 2 people, but it can be expanded to society and global too. But let's look at 2 people. So to have true love for another person is to listen and look at their reality from their point of view, not your point of view, but to look at their reality and their needs and their desires and their hurts and their path from their point of view. That's what he means by true love. It's a deep listening skill. When he speaks of compassion, he does draw the line between feeling sorry for someone to just falling apart because your loved one is really, really depressed, so you fall into depression. He goes, that's not compassion either.
No.
Because compassion is really giving them the space to express what they're feeling and being there and being supportive. So I mean, I assume, I don't really know any psychiatrists or something, but psychiatrists, doctors, counselors, I assume that when they listen to other people's problems, that they have found a way not to get drawn into the depths of despair of their patients, but be supportive and have a big heart and listen to them without being drawn into it. And that's what he means by compassion. Joy means to allow yourself to feel the divine joy and bliss that is this experience in life. Like I said, Tantra is very world affirming. It's very life affirming. And so Thich Nhat Hanh also tells us, allow yourself to feel that joy. And then equanimity is something that you see in the Sutras of Patanjali. You see it over and over again in the Gita. And that is, once we understand who we really are, how can things that happen in this world affect us? They affect Corinne, but they don't affect me. And that is something that we understand more and more as we go through life. And when we start to separate and say, and not identify with this mind-body complex. When we can separate our Jiva Atman, the soul, from just this physical body that is experiencing everything, so that we can learn and then transcend. So I like very much his explanations of what true love is. And according to Tantra, all the creative powers, all the wisdom that we find from Goddess Kali to Goddess Kamatika embodies all these life experiences in ways that we can experience Mother Divine in order to learn from her. Oh, all right, that's it. So let's open it up to some discussion. If we look at the question that Natalie had, either within the parameters of what I just spoke about, or maybe you already had other ideas, how do we interact with people? What guides you? Or what are you looking for in one of the goddesses to help guide you in your interactions?
I think for me, it seemed that Natalie was coming from a place of not knowing what to say when people were looking for wisdom from her, or some form of language, tool of communication that they could embrace. And when you're dealing with people from the West and talking about an Eastern philosophy, you do have to modify the language. Because, and you and I got into this a little bit, where I pulled you up on the use of the word destruction. And I said, no, there is no way for me that, and I was thinking about this today, how language is a part of our evolution. And the fact that Sanskrit and the whole philosophy of Hinduism is very ancient. It goes back onto a time when I hesitate to use the word more, when we were less evolved. than we are now, because that immediately brings into mind a picture of, oh, we're smarter than they were 8,000 years ago, which is absolute rubbish.
Rubbish, yeah.
But we are more evolved. We have been on the path of evolution for longer. Okay, so there have been more changes from the point of starting up to the point of Hinduism is a distance X. From the start of Hinduism to now is a distance X plus. So we've gone further in our evolution, and there have been changes. And it seems to me that our language has softened because we're slowly but surely moving away from the need for aggressive grunt style language, which is very guttural and very, to some extent, aggressive. At that time, it was entirely appropriate and everybody understood what was meant by that. But over a period of time, our language has softened because we've moved more towards diplomacy as a form of survival versus power of arms. Does that make sense? That it was a very different world
Yeah.
at that time than it is now.
Yeah, I agree with you.
The need, yeah. We have refined. We have become more refined in our language.
I will play the devil's advocate and posture this, that in the belief system, I'm not going to say just Hinduism, but from the Vedas. So Vedas came before Hinduism, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the Vedic belief, the world with people has been around millions and millions and millions of years. And I really forget how many yugs or cycles we've gone through of creation and destruction. India used to be called Bharat, which is the land of the illumined. So it's the land of the rishis. And so there are many scholars and believers who believe that India was much more evolved spiritually than the world is now. Especially now, because according to their system, we're in the Kali Yuga, which is the most grossest form of spiritual evolution we can be in. And at this point, we're going to implode or explode, and the cycle is going to begin again. And so I would pose it that perhaps it's not the language itself, but it's our attachment, how we attach different thoughts and emotions to that word that has become more gross now than it was back then. Just another way to look at the evolution of scare, because time is looked at differently when you look at it through the yoga cycles, the yuga cycles. It's very different from looking at it from saying before Christ, after Christ, and now the century. Because there's that timeline does not exist within the Vedic system. So just another way to look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm actually not coming at it from a belief system point of view. I'm actually coming at it from an evolutionary scientific basis.
But what I'm telling you is that there are many people
there's no postulation.
They believe evolutionary, that so many cycles before, society was much more evolved, sophisticated, and more gentle and in harmony within the first two yugas than we are now.
And the basis for that belief system, the authority for that belief system,
is the Vedas, is that the fact that they were able to write such incredible wisdom thousands of years ago that has withstood the test of time is their proof that they were more evolved than people are now in the Kali Yuga. Because they were able to write about these.
Yeah, okay, so the fact of at what point did the Vedas cease to be an oral tradition and
Exactly.
become a written tradition? And at
and
what point did that compare with other civilizations which stopped being an oral tradition and became a written tradition?
It's like we were talking yesterday about telling the story to three people, and the three tell to three, and those three, and it extrapolates out. You could end up in 1 week with a story that has nothing to do with the origin.
If you look at the Word document I gave you, the first couple of pages, there are two YouTube, not YouTube, one is YouTube and one is just a Google reference, and they give a really wonderful comparative timeline of world events from the Vedas on. And it also shows you, there's an incredible description of the Vedas, how the Vedas have changed not changed over time. No, yeah, they did. How the Vedas went from being simply songs and hymns to rituals, to practices, how that changed within the Puranic period, and then how that changed in the medieval period is when Tantra came into being, how that went from being Shiva dominant to Shakti dominant. And so we see that evolution of how it's practiced and manifested those beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
That might lend just another way to look at
it.
Time span and how we look at words and our attachment to words and the emotional patterns that we associate. Because in the Vedas, destroy means it's a good word. They want to destroy the ego because we've used the ego up to a certain point. We've used Mother Divine. We've used all our senses to learn as much as we could. We've used the mind to intellectualize it. And then they believe you must transcend the limitations of this body. So the only way to transcend is you have to let go of the ego, because the ego is your feeling of being separate from somebody else or something else. And in their belief system, in non-dualism, everyone is Purusha. So there can be no separation in their belief system.
Awareness, I think there has to be, every sense, everything, all the tools that you have, and every language, you always come up against this at some point. You can take a non-duality person, you can keep asking them a question, and eventually they fall over themselves. Because we are limited. In this experience, we are limited to our egoic understanding of the world of there is me. However, that is the very first thing that happens in the childhood development, is the separation of me, I, from the other.
Yes.
And our lives are a journey back, not by destroying the ego, but by allowing the ego to encompass the second person and the third person and the group and community perspective. My contention is, if you destroy the ego, you can't do anything.
Right. And I think Natalie also mentioned that the second time, the second time we met, she also echoed something like that. And I'm just telling you that the Vedic method, through meditation, you can transcend the ego. And they say that for them, and you see it in the Gita and you see it in the sutras.
Okay, can I just interrupt a minute? Could you define for me what you mean, what
by
the Vedas
ego
mean by the word transcend? What do you mean by transcend? If I were to ask you to give me a direction that described transcendence, what would you say?
Okay, I would say I cannot do it because I have to speak in non-dualistic terms, and I cannot because I live in a dualistic world. What I can tell you is that this belief system believes that we are more than the mind, we are more than the body, we are more than the ego. We are part of an all-encompassing consciousness, and the only way that you can understand all encompassing is if you don't have an ego, because an ego by its nature is separateness, is division, and there is no division.
No, you see, that is a misdefinition of the word ego. It is a misdefinition. Yes, it is for me, because I don't look at things from a Vedic point of view. I am looking at it from a traveler's point of view.
Yes.
I don't attach to any belief system.
Yes.
If I can avoid it, that has been my journey, is to, yes, study every single one of them, because they are all based in and have truth in them. But to fight my way through the attachments within the belief systems, because a belief system by definition is an attachment, a major attachment, massive attachment.
Absolutely,
so
absolutely.
What I would like to suggest to you at the moment is, every time you talk about transcendence, every time I've seen it, you go, transcend. Mm-hmm. So there's an implication that you are rising above.
Yes.
And what I'm offering as another alternative is transcend, moving through and encompassing all. And the actual definition of the word transcend, trans is across. Mm-hmm. It is going through. But because of the way we have become conditioned in our belief systems, we think of being spiritual as being higher, record better than. We understand transcendence as being higher, record better than. And you see how, if you don't pay attention to the words, to the deeper meaning of the words, they do very easily become manipulated. They create images through programming, and you get what you see in what's the word, fundamentalist aspects of religion.
I will definitely take that. I will definitely take my gestures into mind and think about transcendence, because if we look at the goddesses and as we study them, you will see that some of them actually do use that word to cross over.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they do. It's journeying.
Some say, again, like we're destroying the ego, because again, and that's the way they believe, the ego is the last obstacle to self-awareness. And maybe one of the ways I can describe it is the yogic meditation. Is when you go through yogic meditation, first you look at a gross object. So let's just take a flower or a flame, a candle flame. So first you contemplate only the flame, and what are you doing? You're training your mind to have one focus and not be distracted, first of all. As you do that, calm the breath. Biologically, you're calming the nervous system and you're focusing on just the flame. Okay, so that's the gross object. That's the first type of samadhi. Then you go with that stream of consciousness where you're just focusing on one thing. And then you start to see what is the energy behind the flame, what makes flame. If we look at the 5 elements in yoga, Agni, flame, is one of the 5 basic elements in life that we see at the gross form as fire, campfire, and we see at the most elemental at the Bhutas, before Ahankara and Mahat, and then Purusha and Prakriti. So the second form of meditation is to simply see that subtle energy. We no longer identify with the flame, but we're still identifying with an object, but we see the subtle energy of it. Beyond the subtle energy is the potential. And this is the most subtle of all. So we still see an object. There's still a subject, me, looking at something. So I see the potential energy of that. Now, I've never gotten that far in meditation. But really hardcore meditators, they see the potential of it. When they start to see the potential of it, they're understanding and experiencing the Purusha in the Prakriti. So they're seeing the divine in something that is manifested here in the realm of Mother Divine.
Mm-hmm.
From there, the fourth type of samadhi is when they are only conscious of being conscious. And this is the interesting part for them. If you are conscious of being conscious, there's still a subject and something that is happening. So you have not transcended.
Mm-hmm.
You have not transcended to pure self-awareness, the supreme consciousness. And the only way to transcend is to let go of the ego of subject and object and merge with what you are meditating on. I don't know if that makes any more sense to you or not.
It does, but in the way it is explained, it is in that final bit that for me it goes wrong, and has given rise to some really unfortunate interpretations.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because it is not that the idea that you have to let go of the ego,
Mm-hmm.
to let go of who you are, to be something more. But if you looked at it instead,
or more
that
or
you
less,
could expand.
less.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you could expand from being the ego, a small thing, to becoming so much bigger, so that you are the ego, you are the flame, you are the subtle energy behind the flame, you are the potential behind the sun. So it is all there. There is no letting go of anything.
We could be just talking about different semantics and still coming to the same place.
And that's why I'm saying. That's why I'm saying it isn't the I don't want to say it isn't the belief, because it's not a belief system. When you enter that state, you can't come back and talk to people about it. You can't write it down, because in order to do that, you need to come out of that state. So if you are in that state, that's it. You're not coming back to tell anyone about it. You're not going to write any Vedas about it. You are just going to be that. So everything that is written and everything that is talked about is being talked about by people who believe that is where we go, that is the completion.
I don't want to feel like I'm butting heads with you, but from this point of view, from my studies, the reason why it can be written about is because yoga is simply a system. It's trying to tell you in many descriptive words what the Purusha is and what you will experience, but mostly it's a system. It's a systematic system all through the Vedas, the Upanishads, Tantra, simply how to get to that point that you just described.
Yeah,
that is
exactly.
So when you say it is or is not a belief system, meditation is just a way to get there.
Yeah, meditation is the way to get there. But you see how much else we've attached to that has been attached to that?
Well, I think everyone has to view it from their karmic experience and what they're living right now in life. So of course, everyone attaches different, you have emotional patterns that you attach to words. I have emotional patterns that I attach to words that are obviously extremely different from yours, Annette. We're talking about, I think, the same thing, but we're using really different words. And then I'm sure Barbara, who's been very quiet, has also different
and for me also, yoga is a way of life. We're not just trying to attain this bliss or non-attachment or knowing. It's a way of life. It's not just sitting here and studying about the goddesses. It's meditating, it's breathing, it's changing energy, it's a way of eating, it's a way of living in a non-harmful way. It's a way of my exercising. It's so multifaceted that you can't always like just say it's this. It's and we each, I think we each take from it what we're looking for at a particular time in our lives. And that's one of the differences I see with the young lady who asked us a question.
And Natalie.
Natalie is half our age, and it's a very different space, Annette. It's, you know, if I take myself back to 30 years ago and living, certainly not living, you know, raised, as I told you earlier, in very small English community, and then living in many different countries and continents with different religions and different ways of life. We all change so much. And I think this is one of the wonderful things of learning this right now. It's, I'm not looking for a definitive answer in anything. I'm looking to broaden this way. It's, you know, it's like to open up that vision.
Okay, but the original question is, what words do I use?
Oh, yeah, well.
That was the question, ladies, that was the question. And this young lady who has half of our experience is asking us, what words can I use to talk to people that will not put a barrier up, that will not put a boundary?
Yeah.
Sorry,
I think as a guide, again, the yamas are brilliant. If you observe the yamas,
I agree.
Communication, and then you're not attached to the results, because again, I'm using the word, you don't have any ego, you don't have any skin in the game. All you can do is put your best effort. And so I think if we look at the yamas, like from a business standpoint, so you're going into negotiation. So you observe yamas, which is nonviolent. So of course you use polite language. How do you know what is polite language? Well, you study the culture, first of all, of whoever you're speaking to understand what is polite gestures, what is polite language, so that you do not harm them. So that's nonviolence. Then you observe satya, truthfulness. Okay, truthfulness. Of course, that's easy. You know what is a lie and what is not a lie. You also know what is an omission, which can be construed as a lie. You also know what is within your own self. So you want to be authentic to yourself. So that you follow satya. Then you can follow brahmacharya. Brahmacharya is austerities. So what is that? No overindulgences. So maybe in this negotiation, that could mean you don't ask for 10, you ask for 8, or whatever it is that is in your negotiating power. Then you have aparigraha, which is to not covet and not be too greedy. Again, if you follow ahimsa, satya, brahmacharya, by default, you have to be following aparigraha. So we can see that if you follow all the yamas in whatever communication you have with people, you're doing your best. And if you meditate, if you believe that meditation,
can I say one thing? And you can meditate for 1 second, which gives you more thoughtfulness in the words that you're going to voice.
Exactly. Meditate. In terms of yoga, meditation does not mean to gain anything. It means to get rid of the obstacles that are clouding the clear perception in your mind. So, you know, a very easy example of what is clear perception and what is an obstacle is when we mistake the coiled rope in the darkened room for a snake instead of a piece of rope. But we can do that easily when we're speaking to a loved ones. We see them doing something which we think is hurting our feelings, and it's completely, and as if they're not even thinking about us. They're simply doing some action that we have perceived wrongly. And so I think in terms of Natalie's question, in terms of the right words, the right semantics to use, I think that Natalie, you have to do the work, do your due diligence, diligence on who you're speaking to. Do your due diligence in meditation on being truthful and honest with yourself and what you want to communicate and why you want to communicate it. I find since becoming, not just a teacher to my kids, but teaching other people and interacting with other people, the most helpful thing I do is I sit down and, sorry Annette, but I take my ego out of it the best I can. And I think, what am I trying to communicate and why? And then how can I best meet those people? So it's really wonderful get interactions like what Annette says, because that makes me think, okay, I need to think which words I'm using and in which context and set it up in a way that more people will understand what I'm saying than less people. And so it's wonderful to have this interchange of ideas and expressions so that I can grow as a teacher and a communicator. And I think for Natalie, as she goes into teaching more people her yoga classes and other things that she does, I think it's just follow the yamas to the best you can.
I think actually, you have actually said it right there. You kind of went off a bit, but we communicate the value of what we believe by how we are in the world. That it isn't our words. And it isn't our intellect, or it is how we are in the world. And this is why when we get into discussions, and you must have picked up by now that I'm very antithetical around the use of the word ego, because it is horribly, horribly misunderstood.
Well,
and it has been used,
to that word.
and it has been used and abused by people in positions like you, not you, to control people, to manipulate people, to create cults, to lead people away from the true values of a good life for the purposes of whoever is unable to deal with the power that authority gives them.
And that's a very interesting thing too, that we just said, because we can look at words as triggers, and they trigger an emotional response because of a life experience that we had, right? So when we go into any new learning experience, it's really nice to be aware of those emotional triggers, right? And then what you're going to do with it.
Yes, but the trigger is not the word, it is the term of, it is the idea of destroying the ego, because by implication, it is undesirable. It is not something that you want. It is impossible. It is beyond, and even I believe if you read some of the works of Thich Nhat Hanh, he also says the idea of destroying or the ego, it is not even possible. So what are you asking people to do?
Well, in the Buddhist, perhaps, I don't know Buddhism, so in the Buddhism belief and your belief, that is very true for you and for him. I don't think it's, personally, I don't think it's a universal truth.
You've just done it. Corinne, every time you say that, you do it. You say the next word out of your mouth is I, or personally, or speaking for me, or in my experience. That is the ego. That is attachment to the ego. Okay?
Exactly. I agree.
So
Corinne,
it is, but the only way, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's the point I'm trying to get across. That is the tool that you use to go beyond that.
From an academic point of view, I'm telling you that is not the way the tantric system or the yogic system at all does not follow the pattern that you have set. And I'm not saying you're wrong at all. I'm just saying that the material that I am presenting this is the system and this is how they present it. You don't have to believe it. And I
No,
like your view.
I don't operate like that.
I think it's very helpful to have this interchange, and people can decide what spiritual path and how that path will take them. I'm just saying that this truly is the system that they profess within Tantra.
Okay, I mean, yeah. So basically, what we have is a philosophy that is interpreted through many, many different filters, and this rigid understanding, and it coming across as being a very rigid understanding, that because it is labeled this, it is Vedic, or it is this, or it is this is this, this is it. This is it.
According to the system, yes.
If we can't, yeah, if we can't come together, if we can't find the point of meld where we can say, yeah, okay, I can see how in a belief system that developed thousands and thousands of years ago in a world that we know very little about, which I prefer to study through scientific methods rather than non-scientific methods. If we cannot bring those to a place of harmony and communion, then what is the point? Should we not be moving together rather than suddenly coming to a point where we say, well, sorry, that's what these guys say, and that's what I'm going with?
Are you asking me as a person, as my personal beliefs, or
the class, or the class?
I'm asking you, Corinne, as a teacher, because you have assumed a role as a teacher.
No, as a teacher, I cannot change what the content is. My personal beliefs might be completely different from Tantra. They might be completely different from yoga. I'm not saying what they are. I'm just telling you, as a teacher, I would like to present to you the material of
as it's
Tantra
presented.
And this is how it has been presented. And I really admire Dr. David Frawley, which is why I'm using his interpretation. But there are other interpretations of Tantra out there. But this is his viewpoint that I'm sharing with you.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
I don't disagree with any of it, and I'm not against any of it. And I'm sorry if it sounds like that.
No, I understand what you're saying.
I am very leery. I spend a lot of time listening to people talking about belief systems and the amazing damage that they can wrought in the world. And there is a very strong movement headed by some very brilliant minds who are attempting to make sure that those belief systems are not allowed to influence our children growing up. So in other words, no religion in school, no, and I'm not talking now specifically about the Tantra or the Vedas or anything else, but just the concept of these somewhat rigid belief systems being imposed on young people growing up to the point where they can, at some point in time, become radicalized, become traumatized, become manipulated and abused by those who are established and recognized as teachers of those belief systems.
Well, maybe one example I can give you is in Sri M's autobiography. He had I think he studied for 19 years with his guru before his guru told him, please, you need to go back and become a householder, become a husband, and do your work within that role. He was in Rishikesh on the banks of Ganges, and he met a young woman who was very sick with cancer. She had come to the Ganges, to Rishikesh, to die. And so he went back to his guru and he told him this story. And Sri M was not sure if the guru would even want to see the lady or whatever. And his
Mm-hmm.
guru said, if you have not learned compassion after all these years, what's the use? What's the use of becoming a Vedic scholar, this, that, and the other thing? And so here we see again the yamas coming forefront on how to live a yogic life is compassion towards everyone you meet. And I don't know if you've read anything about Swami Vivekananda.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, he was a great proponent of interchange of religious ideas. He came to that first religious world religion forum in the United States in the late 1800s or early 1900s. And so if you read his bibliography, it's great because he speaks a little bit. I mean, he still, of course, believes in the system of yoga, but he also talks about how we can blend and find the truth in all the different major religions. We can all come together. And I think that's also something that you're expressing. And so I have read, my studies have mostly taken me to the really positive sides of yoga. I haven't seen the horrible sides that you sort of allude to in terms of these systems. But Swami Vivekananda, Sri M, of course, all of them really talk about how can we be all one humanity.
Yes, exactly.
Barbie, you have anything you'd like to say?
I think most of us that came together with this course did not come with a thought of any form of conversion or any form of dynamic religious thoughts behind it. I think we're looking more, it's more broadening our views and understanding some of our, maybe finding a better focus by being able to breathe easier, finding the best of our capacity of what we're able to do without it being the pure religious influence. I see it very differently to you, Annette, and I don't mean that, you know, and I understand exactly what you're saying. At the beginning
that I would come from the other side, that there would, I would not be coming from the same direction.
Good, yes, and I'm in most areas. I'm not a religious person per se. I believe in goodness. I don't follow any die-hard form, and I haven't really come into contact with people that have had problems with areas. I think we all looked at it differently. I think it's certain areas of it are very exotic. The imagery, the music, the instrument. You know, this afternoon I listened to the instrument of the is it the Lena? The
Veena.
The Veena. So I wanted to know exactly how did that sound by itself. So what it's made me do this course and some other courses and some things I've done with Corinne is it's made me look at things that I wouldn't necessarily look at in my day-to-day life. Meeting with a group of interesting women who all come with a different perspective and a different goal. And it's enriching without it necessarily changing all of my mindsets. It enlightens my mindsets without necessarily changing them.
And I remember I had a conversation with some other ladies and they said, well, Corinne, do you believe in dualism or non-dualism? And I remember thinking at that time that was a tricky question because in my role as a teacher, on whether I really wanted to go into my personal belief at that time.
Yeah, because you're teaching, it's not your belief, because that does lead into sticky areas if we follow your belief.
Exactly. And I didn't want that to color their perceptions of the material that I was presenting. And so, you know, again, for Natalie, that's another way that you want to be very honest with yourself when you're communicating with somebody else in that role as a teacher or a guide. You have to take the time to be incredibly truthful with yourself and know where you're going and why.
It's interesting also removing the I from our conversation and using Barbara thinks this way, or Barbara's doing, and we learned that when Corinne and I were in Rishikesh, we had to remove the I. The I was like, it doesn't belong because that's ego. And it's then taking away the personal mindset. I'm not inflicting my or I. I'm talking about Barbara. So there's many ways of how I looked at that, Corinne, and that's one of the ways I think now. It's
Yeah. And if we look at Matangi is also known as a guru goddess. And if you start looking at the literature written about the guru, there's so much about what is a guru, what is the role, how is it defined. One of my students asked me, I think you were there, Barbara, you know, how do you plan your classes? What are you doing? And my answer was, I plan my classes to provoke. I want to provoke an emotional and physical response in you so that you have an experience. And then where you take that, I don't know.
It's up to me.
You grow from there, but I want to provide an opportunity for that to happen. And I do love all the literature that the yoga practitioners write about a guru and how it is viewed and how the student is viewed. What are the obligations of the student? What are the obligations of the guru? I mean, that's another discussion.
It's good to have obligations. It's good to have the obligations as a student as well as the teacher. I think you have to have this flow, this rolling of thought between people.
Do you remember what Ganesan said to us that first day, Barbara, when we came in? He said, "You all have volunteered to be here."
I know.
I don't know if you remember that. Because it was in Rishikesh, Annette, and it's called the Sadhana Mandir. So it's a place of study and practice. And he said, you know, you guys,
we chose to be there, so now we're going to learn.
For these next 10 days.
And it's
here's the schedule, show up.
Yeah. I mean, it was fascinating. After 2 days, I wanted to run away, you know, and 10 days later, it broke my heart to leave there. So I think we all share. I think that's part of what this is.
Yeah.
Sharing.
So that's why I say I really
and it's generational sharing. It's women's. It goes back to women's circles, to ancient times. It's, you know, older women sharing with younger women, sharing the knowledge, and in return they share the new knowledge of youth.
Exactly.
It's when I listen to Kiran, to your daughter, and she says things, and I think this is exactly why we're here. There's a reason for it. There's a reason why there's things I don't know that Corinne thinks I should know that I now know I need to know. It's like consciously being conscious. We need to share thoughts. We need to have dialogue. We need conversations. We need to have someone provocative like you are, and to give thought and give a completely diametric opposite meaning, because that's how we all grow. And that's how we hold on to this preciousness of the gift of life that we have, and to share it.
Yep. That's why, Annette, I really, sorry, Barbara, but yes, I agree with everything you said. And I wanted to just close with, Annette, I really appreciate the dialogue that we have, because each of us, okay, this is my personal belief, each of us have our own path to follow. And if you believe in reincarnation, who knows how many millions of years each one of us have lived and where we are in our spiritual evolution, if you want to call it that. So I like having the dialogue and the interchange. And also what I've noticed with everyone is that there's two things going on. One, of course, there's the absorption of new material and just absorbing that. And then the second one, it's really interesting how people are expressing how they are internalizing this new information and taking it into their practice, yes or no, whether they're doing it or not. So there's these two things going on. I'm trying to learn as much as I can, and then I keep going, how's it personal to me? How's it personal to me? And what am I keeping? What am I throwing out? What am I categorizing into A, B, C, D, and E? And how does that coalesce into a coherent thought, which is all yoga. Yoga, as we spoke about, it tells you, how does your mind work? How do thoughts work? How do you categorize it? What is memory? What is sleep? And it's just this incredible system of how to live, not how to live, how we do live and experience life. And where you want to go where you want to go is up to you. But it shows you a system of what you can do if you want, according to this system.
Yeah, I wouldn't be here listening or studying, and I wouldn't have studied. I am just very aware of the pitfalls that, and maybe that's what I'm here for in this group. To every time there is that sense of self-satisfaction, of I know this, I've got this. Maybe I am the voice that's going to say, are you absolutely certain about that? Is there another possibility? Because it is when people teach from a place of absolute certainty that they can do the most damage.
Yep.
It's that maybe that's, it's not intended as an attack in any shape or form, because I wouldn't, like I said, if I didn't think you were a good teacher, I wouldn't be here. But it is this, it doesn't pay to be complacent.
No.
Around that. And it doesn't, as we as students, it doesn't pay us to be complacent either, to say, I don't have to think about this because she's just told me what it is. And all I have to do is follow that. Yeah. So there's no room for complacency in a diagnosis or a situation like this.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And the thing that I have, and I think I've told you this before, or maybe it was Antoinette, that I, several years ago, dispensed with the whole idea of teachers. That for me, there are only students. And if there are such a thing as teachers, it is the people that the student chooses to learn from. So that anybody can be a teacher if a student decides to learn from them. And therefore, that one of the most important things that everybody has to do in every minute of their daily life is to be aware that somebody may be watching and learning from them.
I think as a mother, we learned that from day one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was one of the things that you never
monkey
ever
see,
know
monkey
when someone
do.
is learning something from you. So the yamas and the niyamas then take on a whole different, an even more intense significance for everybody. Is that only by living that and being that can you be certain that you are teaching effectively. And that if you don't, then you maybe someone is learning the wrong thing. And you can only do that for yourself. But in a group like this, there are witnesses. We are all witnesses. And as students, I think we have a responsibility to you and to ourselves to bear witness.
Yep.
And that bearing witness will be, it will take the form of, yeah, I see where you're coming from, but this is what it looks like to me.
Yep.
And having that fully accepted.
Yeah.
So, you know, it doesn't have to, we don't have to believe, I don't have to believe what you're teaching me. You don't have to believe what I am, the direction from which I'm coming from. That's the whole point. It is simply that, oh, wow, yeah, okay, so there's that point of view as well.
Yeah.
You know, and we just move in that, and as a group, then we grow.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, I think
So I don't know what we say to Natalie now.
No,
That's up to you, Corinne. That's down to you.
I'm starting to think you better just delete this entire recording.
No. No, I'm telling you, you know what? This is what I told to another young girl. I said, there's no shortcut. I said, you know, you have a question. I said, but there's no shortcut. You have to do the work.
Yeah,
exactly.
You just
be
have
wary if you ask a question.
Yeah. Exactly. You know, oh my God. Have you ever read, you know, Ram Dass, right?
Yes.
I think Ram Dass. I was reading something that he wrote when he first came to India and stuff. And he went to a guru. And he said that the guru wrote one word like on a whiteboard and then walked away. That was his lesson. Oh my God.
I wonder if he wrote it in black ink.
Well, then, you know, again, if you listen to Krishna Das talking about his experiences, you know, everybody came and they listened because they wanted to learn. And the guru just sits there and, what the hell are you doing here? Just go out, feed the people, love each other. That's it. That is it. You know, and if this great saint comes out with that, you got to say, you know, maybe he's got a point. Yeah.
I know.
Maybe everything else is just to give us confidence. Just to give us confidence.
It's like, it's so trite, but all we need is love. I go, yeah, right. You know what I said? There's got to be more.
Yeah, you've got to define love for me. Define love for me.
Oh, well. Anyway, ladies, thank you so much.
Great discussion. Thank you, Corinne.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it. And I hope that everybody else who didn't come will enjoy this too.
We'll sit through the full hour of it.
I think they're going to fast forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, good night, everybody. It was a wonderful
good night.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good night, Corinne.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.